Dr. Corsini, I'm interested in these units that
Yeah.
you talk about.
Yes.
They've been developed for all the subject areas at all grade levels?
Yes,
It must have been a tremendous job.
It's a tremendous job, and at this point, every school has developed its own set of units. I hope as individual education grows and develop, we'll establish a kind of a standard library of units. So if a new school comes in, they don't have to reinvent the wheel and have them all ready.
But with the schools that already have the individual program, their units are not available to other schools.
Oh, yes, it would depend on the school. Let's suppose a school right here in this area were to start. You could write to all of the other schools and say, hey, would you either give us or sell us your units so that our faculty could examine them. Now, if you were, let's say, you three were the math faculty of a school, and let's suppose you get 100 units from one school and 100 from another and so on, you can make your selections and just change the name or little minor items. But at the present time, every school has done its own. Mike Mastriani in Florida and Sister Joan Madden in Hawaii are as examples, and they've done their own.
You mentioned 2 or 3 times, Dr. Corsini, that children spend about 2 hours a day in academics. Now, how is that 2-hour period organized
Sure.
in the classroom?
Well, I said on the average, you see, a child could theoretically in our schools go to classes or study academics from 0 hours a day to 4 hours a day. So let's say a child like the one I mentioned before, you know, was in the library, didn't go to classes at all. A child, let's assume, who really wants to plug away and so forth, can do up to 4 hours, 3 hours in classes, and then three 40-minute classes. That's 120 hours or 2 hours a day, which is our general expectation, plus time spending in the study hall or the library. Now, how it's worked out is by the faculty. They pre-establish at the beginning of the year, depending on the size of the school and the number of children, things of that kind, they pre-establish a program. So, for example, if you were a math teacher, and if I were the principal, based on my knowledge of the school situation, I might say to you, would you mind in a second period of the day, every day, that you will be teaching math starting at Unit 26 this week, 27 the next week, 28 the next week, and so on. That'll be your sequence for the second period. Now, the third period might be you start on math 4, let's assume, and then 5, 6, 7. Or the next period might be math 122, then 123, 124. This is established at the beginning of the year by the math faculty, the English faculty, the science faculty, and so on. So the program is quite flexible in terms of the needs of the school.
Is it common then if a youngster shows up in the classroom? We talked earlier about a youngster going to a classroom where there were older children.
Sure.
And his learning level isn't appropriate to what is being taught in there. And then will the individual teacher generally refuse to let him come in there?
No, generally will not. As I mentioned earlier, the teacher's job is not to monitor children or even to be concerned about children's learning. The teacher's job is to do the very best job of teaching that she possibly can. And anybody who comes into our class, regardless of age or anything else, if they don't disrupt her, don't disrupt others, can stay. Now, this is the general rule. Again, I want to make it, matter of fact, I put it so strongly that it sometimes offends people, but the faculty members as teachers do not teach children. They teach subjects. Now, what that means in effect, and we show this on this tape, we'll see it at one of these scenes, where a child comes into a math class, they're teaching multiplication, and the teacher is showing it, says, and now we add. So a child raises his hand and says, what is addition? So instead of her doing what would be done in a traditional school, putting the child in the corner and then teaching him addition, She simply says to the child, this is math unit 48 and multiplication, and in order to understand multiplication, you should have taken units 22 to say to 28, which is addition, so you're in the wrong place. You can stay if you want, or you can leave, but you will not give the child tutoring in the class.
This is putting a responsibility back on him to be in the proper class.
That's the first R.
Suppose, this child refuses to leave.
That's never happened, but I keep being asked that, and I give the following answer. If a child refuses to leave, then a teacher leaves. She goes to the office and tells the principal or somebody there, and then that person comes in. Now, this is kind of like a joke, what I'm going to tell you. Then, if the child still refuses to leave, they call the police department to get the child out. And then, if the child still refuses to leave, they call the National Guard, and with bayonets, they get the child out. But so far, it hasn't yet happened.
You haven't tested that one yet.
They've never tested it. I think we should conclude at this point, don't you?
May I ask
One last
more
question.
Yes.
What would be the procedure for someone who might be interested in setting up an individual education program in a particular school, whether it be a parent or principal or group of teachers or whoever? How would you go about doing this?
Well, I would recommend the following steps, and in this sequence. One, see all of these tapes to get the idea of what it's all about. Second, read the literature that's available, which will be printed on the tapes. There is one book right now called Alternative Educational Systems, edited by Dr. Edward Ignis and myself, and one of the chapters is about individual education. And there's a journal, the Journal of Individual Psychology, November 1977. It was all about individual education. So first these tapes, then the literature. The next thing would be to get in touch with me or others who have information about the various schools, and I would suggest making telephone reference checks with these various schools. We have a number of superintendents, a number of people who belong to Individual Education International, to ask them questions. Then the next step would, I would recommend to visit one of our schools and see for yourself. Then if you're interested, get in touch with Individual Education International for help on training.
In individual education, there are three kinds of tests. At the beginning of the school year, the Standard Scholastic Achievement Test is administered. This is a power-type test in which the student is allowed as much time as is needed in order to complete the test so that we can determine how much the student knows. The test is administered in language arts, mathematics, science, and social study. The purpose for the pretest is to determine where the student actually is at in terms of knowledge so that he can properly be placed. An example of this test would be a student has gone through the first, second, and third grade. At such time, the student is administered the test, and his test score might indicate that he is at a high school level or that he is at a first grade level. The test score is here used by the teacher advisor. Here the teacher advisor with the student would consult and decide as to the proper placement of the student. Another test is the teacher-made test. Here the teacher, at any particular time, in any particular unit that the student might be in, may ask them a question concerning the unit. For example, the student might be in a mathematics unit. Question could be, what is the square root of 117? Or he might ask a student different questions such as multiplication or division. The most important test in individual education is the unit test, which is given on a weekly basis. Here the student, when he has completed the unit, can take the test to determine how much he has learned.
In individual education, there are 5 ways or methods in which the student may choose to learn. First way, and the most common way, about 95% of the students choose that, is the classroom. And that works very simply. The unit of instruction is posted on a bulletin board or disseminated in some way within the school. For example, it may say that on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 o'clock in room 101, Ms. Freeman will do a module on social studies. And any student who wants to learn about that particular specific subject within social studies will show up at Ms. Freeman's classroom on the specified date and time. Second way is the library. All of the curriculum is encapsulated within particular books, core curriculum booklets like this one, within the library. And if the student chooses to study individually in the library, he goes to the librarian and she'll help him if he needs help to find the particular course material that he needs, and it has the instructional material in it and further references if he wants to look up anything related to that and do follow-on work. Third way is very interesting. It's peer study. That entails going to the study hall if the student opts to do that, and the supervisor there will direct him to the particular table or cluster of his peers that are working on that subject that's of interest to him, that he's chosen to learn at that particular time. And he'll sit down and share his knowledge on that subject and learn from his peers about that particular item of interest. The fourth way is one-on-one tutoring with a teacher, a member of the faculty. If the student chooses to do that, within individual education, all of the teachers set aside at least one period every afternoon to be available for one-on-one work with each student. And the fifth way the student may choose is to be at home, to work at home, and study any subject that he wants to, listening to and talking with his friends, his siblings, parents, and learn outside of the school. So 5 ways in which the student may choose to learn anything that he wants to focus on. First, and the most popular, of course, the classroom, and then the library, where he would work individually on text material. Third, working with his peers in the study hall, learning from each other. Fourth, working one-on-one with a tutor, in individual private time. And fifth, at home with his friends and family.
In individual education, there are 3 types of material which are used beyond those used in the regular schools. The first of these is the curriculum book. The curriculum book has in its beginning a listing of the unit number covered in this particular book, and in the example given is a Science Unit 56, Organs of the Human Body. The objectives of this unit of study are outlined, as well as the process suggested for learning this material. Examples are then given as to the type of materials that will be tested at the end of the unit, and finally, reference materials are made available to both the student and the teacher. The second type of material available to individual education, which is not available in other schools, is the progress chart. The progress chart is a listing of unit numbers which correspond to the discipline areas of language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. As a student works on a particular unit of material in each of the discipline areas, his progress is noted as he deals with each unit. In marking the progress chart, should a child attempt to complete a test at the end of a unit and fail, a dot is placed in the center of the corresponding unit box. Should a child attempt to complete the unit test and do so, a slash is placed in, a diagonal mark is placed in the corresponding unit box. Should a student not attempt the test, then the box corresponding to the unit that is being worked on is left blank. Finally, when the teacher advisor has counseled the student as to their progress and made note of the progress, then a corresponding slash is made indicating that the materials have been completed. This is an example of a progress chart for a young person who has completed 1 month in a program. You will note that in language arts and mathematics, the youngster has failed to complete the tests appropriately, but in science and social science has completed the tests. The same youngster's progress, when seen several months later, indicates that the area of the level of work has been lowered and the student is making progress in the various areas and correspondingly experiencing some difficulty and continued successes in these areas. At the end of a school year, a progress chart may very well look like this, giving an overall indication as to the youngster's progress. The final material used in individual education, in addition to those used in other schools, is the list of unit titles, so that these titles and subject matter can be available to the parents as the child brings home information indicating that they have completed a particular unit, perhaps Unit 2 in mathematics. The parents would then be available to be aware that their child had completed information in mathematics on number facts relating to the numbers 10 to 100.
In individual education, we're aware of the enormous variability in the capacity for children to learn. In traditional education, the child is forced to go to the classroom and be in the classroom all day. In individual education, the child proceeds at his own pace. He tailor-makes his own program. For example, a child may excel in math, and the unit that is being taught is division of complex fractions. The unit will be taught on each day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. This child may go to the classroom on Monday and feel that he's already learned it, he's got it. He then may choose to go to the library or study hall or to another classroom and then take the unit test and pass it. Another student may go to the classroom each day and still not feel he's able to pass the test and fails the test. He then may take it at another time. The importance of individual education is that it has an enormous efficiency. The child tailor-makes his own program, he has that freedom, and he does whatever he needs to do and then takes the unit test at the end.
In individual education, we have a unique method of maintaining discipline in the classroom. It is a nonverbal method. Before a child can be accepted into the school, the child and the parents are informed and accept this method of maintaining discipline. If, in the judgment of the teacher, a student is interfering with the learning process of other students and in any way is causing any disruption in the classroom, the teacher simply does this. She points to the child and she points to the door. The child must leave immediately and in silence. Once outside of the classroom, the child may decide to re-enter the classroom and may do so and return to his work. If the teacher decides that the child should not come back into the classroom and they don't want them in at that point in time, they simply do this. It is the signal to stay out. Once outside of the classroom, the child may try to re-enter another classroom or the study hall or the library.
The single most important part of individual education is the relationship between the child and the teacher advisor. The child has the freedom to choose from among the faculty a person he desires to work with as his teacher advisor. The teacher chosen may or may not elect to work with the child as an advisee. From among the many important factors that the teacher advisor has to perform in individual education, I should only discuss one, and that is academic advisement. The teacher advisor will review all the materials, classes, and schedules applicable to the child's education for that academic year. Based upon this review, the teacher advisor will make some specific recommendations based upon the proficiency levels demonstrated by the child in those courses. For example, if a child has demonstrated high proficiency in the language arts, the teacher advisor may elect to recommend that the child not study language arts for that particular year, but could utilize that period of time to go to the library to study other subjects of interest to that particular child. In addition, the specific recommendations will be based upon test results. For example, the teacher advisor may recommend that the child study the 3rd grade math, the 7th grade language arts, 5th grade science, and 5th grade social studies. Upon receiving this information, the child may abide by those recommendations, but he's not under obligations. The child may reject that information and may establish his own program as he sees best for himself. There are two purposes for providing this information to the child. First, the child utilizes it in development of his program. The second, he advises his parents of this information. Upon reviewing this information, the parents may wish to have a conference with the teacher advisor, the teacher, and the child. The teacher advisor should not have conferences with the parents without the presence of the child. Of course, there are exceptions to this policy. This policy can be changed by the principals of the schools in which the persons are working based upon the needs of the child. Still, there are other important functions of the teacher advisor. Instantly after each one of the unit tests have been taken and the results are known, the teacher advisor shall have a conference with the child to appraise the child of his results. By this means, the child is constantly given an appraisal of his progress. This particular chart will depict that kind of information. Finally, throughout the school year, the teacher advisor will have a conference once a month in private with the child. Therefore, throughout the school year, approximately 9 to 10 conferences will be held with each child. This way, each child will have an update briefing on his progress and academic performance to that particular point throughout the academic year.
The role of the parent in an individual education school is different from that of a traditional school. For example, there are no homework assignments or assigned work at home. Therefore, the parent is spared from fighting with their children to get them to do their homework. We believe that children are responsible for their own learning, and when given this responsibility, they will be responsible. Academically, we see parents as helpers, but only if the children ask for assistance. If children would like to have parents go over a mathematics work, check problems, or review spelling words, it's all right if the child asks for the help. Parents are informed of this approach to academics before they enroll their child in an individual education school. An individual education school is always an alternative. It's a school that is chosen by the parents and by the children. In addition, no faculty members will call parents or write letters to parents about children's progress, nor will they send home what Dr. Dreikers referred to as love letters, complaining about the children.
In individual education, a faculty member is both a teacher and an advisor to the students. There is also available a person with specialized training called a consultant, and the consultant is available to the teacher advisors if the teacher advisor has children that present problems or difficulties in the classroom that they feel that they need additional help with. In going to the consultant and discussing a particular child with such difficulties, the consultant may talk with the parents, the child himself, or with appropriate other people. The consultant may also determine that the child has difficulties of such a nature that outside help may be required and is beyond the scope of what can be provided in the school situation. In that case, a consultant may refer the child and the parents for outside help, such as going to a clinic for counseling or for family counseling. The child may have speech difficulties, which may require the services of a speech therapist, for example, which would be provided outside of the school itself. And the consultant is a person who is available and is on standby with children that the regular faculty have more difficulty in dealing with than they can handle.
This program has been made possible by a gift from the estate of Seymour E. Klonock of Chicago, Illinois.